All right, good to see so many of you on this great Friday morning. We're very happy to see you and glad you could join us. As I mentioned, this is our 15th virtual Coffee with a Principal session, but this one will be a little bit different than most in that most of them dwelled on COVID and COVID mitigations and what we're doing or not doing. This one will give you an update on that, a little preview of what we expect the rest of the year to go, how it's supposed to go. And also, we are planning on soliciting some information from you in this meeting to talk to you about a 3-year plan that's coming up. So we are feeling really good about some forward-thinking actions that we haven't been able to do quite as much, and we'd love your input. So today will be the first opportunity for parent input, though there will be a couple other opportunities moving forward. So before we start up, we'll just hit a couple of the kind of ground rules. Do us a favor and mute your microphones unless you are speaking. That way we don't have any other side noise coming through. Feel free to unmute if you have questions. Also, if you have questions, the chat feature is open. Let me confirm that. Yeah, the chat feature is open, so feel free to put questions in the chat. If you wanted to send a private chat, do that to Pamela Hansen because she is managing the chat for us. I probably won't see it if you put it to me directly. If your questions pertain to just your child, reach out to me directly through email or Mrs. Lee, and we can kind of help you with those. We're going to hope to answer questions that pertain to the group. And then we are recording this. So if you have to leave early, it will be uploaded to our YouTube channel for viewing. And if you have anybody who misses it, they'll get some additional opportunities to share information later, but you'll get to do so in this meeting today. So I want to start out by welcoming you. I am glad that you are here after nearly, 11 months of this. I am flattered that you would still join the Zoom on purpose and come listen to what I have to say. If you're anything like me, you've had enough of this interaction mode and are looking forward to real in-person stuff. So I am glad that you decided to take time to be with us today. As I mentioned, we're going to look at 2 major topics today. We're going to be looking at number 1, what's our current instructional models and how is that likely to look for the remainder of this school year? And then what are we looking at in a forward-thinking mode for the next 3 years? And I'll kind of explain to you why we're kind of taking that kind of big approach in just a moment. So to give you a little current instructional model, most students, as we've been saying this from day one when we shut down, most students do better. They do better academically, they do better socially, they do better emotionally, they do better in their character development if they're allowed to come to school and interact with others. And we've been really pleased that at this point in time, we've got the majority of our students doing that. It doesn't make sense for everybody. And we have, as we move into the 3rd trimester, we expect about 15% of our students to remain on distance learning, most of those by choice. And we understand that we need to keep a quality instructional program for that choice because there's still a lot of circumstances by which people will decide to have their kids home. But we're really pleased that about 85% starting in the 3rd trimester will be back with us. We're about 80% now, and we're going to be bringing a few more kids back in to start that 3rd trimester. And we are the minority in that. We're the minority, both I believe in the quality of what we're providing, but also the quantity of our learning. And we've been really proud of our teachers and our staff and the flexibility of our families to make that happen, because it's really not an easy task in this. And I know that there's been a lot of push and pull and up and down and in and out and pretty much every imaginable way of addressing your child's learning from home, from school, and somewhere in between. And we're really very blessed to have a great teaching staff, a great support staff, and great families that have supported that along the way. So I wanted to thank you and really acknowledge the staff that we have here at school that continues to make that happen. Because like I said, it's not an easy task to do. Our first question that we had was, what's the rest of the year going to look like? And as I've shared with you before, I have been woefully negligent in my predicting abilities, but I'll tell you kind of what it's looking like right now and what I kind of expect us to be rolling out. right now we have two slightly different instructional models for our middle school and our elementary. Our middle schoolers, if you have middle schoolers, most days, all days but Friday, they're here until 1:05, which means that they only have 1 hour of their day that is asynchronous. So they really have essentially a full instructional day. They go home an hour for lunch, and then they have an hour of asynchronous learning. We expect that model to continue for middle school into the third trimester, with only about 30 middle school students that are on distance learning. We were able to bring back a handful of students that were distance learning to start the third trimester. But at this point, the folks that remain are probably going to remain on distance learning for the remainder of the year, absent a change in health conditions or guidance. We're at our capacity for middle school. So those 30 that have yet to return or have yet to secure a spot to return will remain on distance learning. And then we have a full slate of classrooms, which we're very, very happy to be able to do so, maximizing those classrooms at 23 or less. That allows us to do sufficient distancing and then keep students within their cohorts. We're seeking to emulate an extended day in our elementary as well. So what we've had so far is we've had elementary students on most days, those Monday to Thursday. If you have an elementary student, you know they get at about 12:05. And our goal is to seek opportunities to extend that elementary school day as well, to emulate the middle, to get closer to that 1:05. The elementary is a little bit more challenging because as you know, especially those have been along this long journey with us, know that when we started talking about an elementary model at the beginning, one of the non-negotiables for our families and our teaching staff was the separation of teachers and kids. And so we've been really challenged in, as we expand our middle school and we have less distance learners, how do we still keep all kids connected to their teacher? So we're having some good conversations with our teachers right now, and we believe that we have pockets of opportunity where there's very few distance learners and the ability to either dual Zoom to kids that are at home, or to serve their needs either throughout the day or towards the end of the day and still extend. So you're likely to hear some classes to start the third trimester, which is only about a week and a half away, that will start extending either pockets of students or classes a little bit longer in the school day. Our goal is to stretch that out through elementary, but we have some classes that are almost 50-50 splits between our distance learners and our in-class learners, which makes it much harder to serve both. And so you'll hear some more from me as we work that out with teachers as far as the opportunities that we have to extend the school day, and then what supports that we can continue to provide so that we have a quality learning environment for the kids that are at home. So you'll hear little rumblings of that. Probably won't be a universal all elementary. We're looking at TKK essentially staying where they're at as far as dismissal time, at least in the short term, and then looking for opportunities for first through fifth, especially in those classrooms where the distance learners are small, one or two distance learners, and how do we serve their needs, but perhaps give more time to kids here on campus. So kind of stay tuned for that. But we look for some exciting things because really our goal is to kind of get, and this goes to another question that we had, is to get to full day learning. And people say, hey, are we going to get to full day learning this school year? And I can tell you that's our goal, but there's a couple challenges to it. The one challenge that we're facing is the requirement, and we agree with this requirement. We don't agree with all of them, but the requirement of keeping stable groups here at school. And so what that means is that if your child's in a kindergarten class, they interact with the adults or adult and the children within that kindergarten class. And we really minimize their opportunities to interact. So on the playground, they stay with that group. As we dismiss, we keep them in that group. When they take their snacks or their breaks, they stay with that group. And the goal of that is to not only minimize the risk of exposure, the less students they're exposed to, the less likely they could be exposed, but also to minimize the impact if there is. So many of you know that at some point in this year, we've had your children that have been placed on a quarantine, approximately 2 weeks. And generally that was because somebody who was positive that didn't know they were positive came to school and was in contact with that cohort. By keeping them together in that stable group, that's the only group that becomes affected. And so one of the challenges for us is not only on extending the day beyond the lunch break, and how are we going to still serve the distance learners in elementary, but how do we actually have them take a lunch break when we don't want them in their classrooms taking their masks off and eating, and we don't have a real viable way of taking them out to lunch without there being some mixing. Because, I think when you're looking at trying not to mix classes, for those of you who remember what lunch used to be like when you were in school, it's a big mixing bowl. Everybody gets together, you get to see your friends. And that's one of the important things of school. And we're looking forward to getting to that. We're just not too sure if the conditions will support that this school year. So, but that is our goal. And our goal has been from the very start is who can we get in and how can we do that safely and how can we continue to expand? And so, like I said, you'll see some expansion in the length of the school day for pockets in elementary with our goal to try to get to full day. But we'll keep you informed along the way. And we're super encouraged right now by the trends that we're seeing health-wise. We're definitely not out of the woods. And we are definitely not in an area that we need to let our guard down and take down some of the mitigations that we have. We're not there yet, but we're super encouraged at the direction we're heading. And so we're going to continue with the things that we're doing. And as conditions permit and as guidelines permit, we'll look to lessen some of those restrictions and be able to provide more opportunities for kids. So that's kind of where we're at on all of those things. Before we jump into 3-year plan, is there any questions or any clarifications that any of you guys have? We haven't seen anything in the chat yet about sort of COVID stuff or this current school year. Okay. So if you think of them, my goal on these sessions is to give you information that's relevant and then answer your questions. So if you come up with those questions later, just put them in the chat or ask on mute, and we will answer those for you. So the main focus of this session right now is to really kind of give you a little bit of background on our planning process for the school, and then really seek out some of your input. One of the great benefits of San Pasquale Union being a single school is that we make decisions for this particular school. We make decisions for us as opposed to a larger district or some school on the other side of town. It's all about us. Part of that planning process is called the LCAP, and it stands for the Local Control Accountability Plan. And some parts are as boring as it sounds, but it is important, and it's important in a couple ways. It's important in that it takes what we're saying are our goals and our priorities and formalizes them, and then attaches it to how we spend our money. There's a focus in it on certain populations, but there's a goal in order to improve the school and the school environment for all. So let me share my screen with you, and I'll go through a couple little pieces of background information and let you know kind of where we're going before we ask you for some input if you're ready to share. All right, so you should be seeing my screen at the moment. And so to give you a little bit of an overview of what the LCAP is, it's a 3-year plan, and we are finishing up the 3rd year of the 3-year plan. And next year will be our opportunity to create a new plan. And that's why it's a little bit exciting right now, in that we are not only excited about thinking about what the future could bring, but really taking some of the things that we've learned through this process and making the educational environment better for our kids. And so the LCAP's a 3-year plan, gets reevaluated and adjusted each year. There's a focus on, and it's a very, I don't know, I don't love the term, but the state puts a focus on our unduplicated students. And what they mean by that is that these are students that are either our English learners or our foster youth, our low socioeconomic, students with disabilities. And they call them unduplicated because there's a funding component that attaches to our number of students, but each student's only counted once. So if a student happens to be a low socioeconomic student and also receives special education services, the funding for that comes in one time. And so that's why they call them unduplicated. But the plan really is a focus on some of those areas to make sure that our children of most need receive appropriate support. But it's also focused on benefits for our whole school and making sure that all students benefit and that our programs kind of match our goals and our values and what we want for our kids. Like I said, there's an annual review. So we'll talk about, did we meet some of the goals that we set before? And then how does that guide our process moving forward? We'll set some goals within this, and then we'll attach some money to it. So that's kind of the process of how this thing works. There's a couple things that we need to link it to. And so you'll kind of see where our starting point is. And hopefully with a little of this information, you'll kind of understand why we did that. There's 8 state priorities. So the state says that in your LCAP, you need to address these 8 things. And then there's 6 board goals. So our governing board, last time we met to set out the goals for the district, they have 6 goals that are our priority. And so our goal in setting these new goals is to align these 3 things. And so I'll just go really quickly. The state basically says, hey, you need to do 8 things. And you'll say, Mr. Burrows, there's 10 things on here. 2 of them are for county offices of education. So 8 that apply to us. And they fall in 3 buckets. And so one of these buckets is conditions of learning. And that's a lot of basic stuff, meaning, do we have a school that is actually safe? Are we implementing the standards that are required by the state? And do kids have access or an equal access to courses? And so when we vetted this through, we've had a couple conversations so far with school site council and our school board and our teachers. And now we're getting some information from you guys as well. School site council had a lot of questions on that course access piece, talking about things like, can we introduce additional courses or advanced courses or language courses, and at what scope can we? So there was some talk about that and making sure that those were available to all instead of a select group of kids. The next area is pupil outcomes, and that's how kids are doing. And that is mostly tied to state tests that kids take. So our 3rd through 8th graders, how are they performing on these assessments? As you may recall, we canceled those, or we didn't, the state did, because of COVID last year. So we don't have that same data. And so you'll see things that we've collected internally, but they were collected under pretty difficult conditions. So part of our goal in there is to try to tease out what has been the impact of these school closures on academics, and what are some areas that we need to focus on to mitigate some of that learning loss in the areas that it may have occurred. And then the last section is engagement. And that has a lot to do with you guys, because it's how are we engaging our parents and guardians and families to meet these goals? And how are we engaging our pupils, and what kind of climate are we setting up for them? Are we setting up a climate that's conducive to learning, that's safe, that addresses a lot of needs beyond academics, social, emotional, so forth? The 6 board goals that it ties to, you'll see a lot of overlap in that. And those 6 board goals, the board sets forth long-term fiscal and legal integrity, meaning we need to be able to pay our bills and we need to be able to stay out of trouble. And so that's a lot of my work, is making sure that we can do those 2 things, because the rest of it kind of shuts down if we're not. They also talk about having a safe, clean, well-maintained school. In the era of COVID, that takes on a new meaning. And so that'll be part of our focus moving forward. Obviously, there's academic achievement, a goal in here. We're a school and we strive to have high academic achievement for all students. And that was a big discussion among the board, is, hey, this needs to make sure that we're reaching those students that fall on that unduplicated. We're reaching the kids most at risk, but we're also reaching and challenging kids at the other end of the spectrum and through the middle. And so part of this goal is, how are we addressing the needs of all kids? They wanted to make sure our goal was focusing on staff improvement, to make sure that our staff is highly effective and can teach kids even in these challenging times. And I think our staff has really stepped up in this realm to be effective in really difficult circumstances. The 5th one, they were looking at 21st century learning environment. And that can mean a lot of things. But there was a focus on what skills do kids need? And there's within the goals of the board, there's the 6 C's, and they include stuff like teaching kids to be critical thinkers and embracing their creativity and their ability to collaborate with others, their character development. So it's not just hitting straight up academics. Our goal is really to build kids of character, confidence, and competence. They really should be good people when they walk out the door. And you guys make our job easier in that you send good kids to start with. So our job is to kind of help them become good people, good academics, and make sure that there's a confidence about them for their next steps in life. And then the last one is the family community partners. And again, that's one of the goals that we're proposing for this LCAP is we took a school that was very vibrant with parent involvement and then literally shut and locked the doors to access. How do we, as we start having the ability to bring folks back, reconstitute those things that were working really well and then kind of learn from them and build? And so that's kind of what we're looking at here. When you look at this, all this does is it tells you the 4 areas that we're leaning towards on our LCAP goals. We haven't established them yet, but we're leaning towards goals that are obviously increasing student achievement, building those students of character and confidence, providing that safe, well-maintained school, and promoting those family and community partnerships. You kind of see on the right-hand side of this screen, those board goals that we just talked about. And I just kind of pulled some things out that were important to the board, which was, that we're focusing on every student and that our staff is centered on students. We've talked a lot with the board about making sure that we had a safe school. And we're really fortunate that at this point, the COVID mitigations that we put in place, we haven't had any on-campus transmission. And we've had a lot of people here. And so we're very proud of that. Some of that is fortunate because we are dealing with a contagious disease and we've had a number of people on campus with it. But the mitigations have been working so far. So the board wants to make sure that the school is safe for people to come to. We kind of jumped through the rest. We've talked about those already. So what I wanted to talk to you guys about is we have met with our site council. And like I said, they were asking some questions about course access and supports for students. We met with our board and they were focusing on those issues. And then we just recently met with our teachers and we kind of ran through some of these proposed goals. And really what this screen shows is some of the things that were resonating with our teachers and our classified staff under these areas as some directions of either building upon what's working well or really looking at some things that we need to focus on either for improvement or for innovation. And so when we talked to the teachers, they were saying that, hey, in this goal of increasing student achievement, they really want to focus on the ability to provide tutorials and perhaps an extended school day, maybe even an extended school year to provide the supports for not only the students who need, but the students who may have lost learning. Because despite our best efforts, we had a time in the spring of last year where no kids were allowed to come to school. And even though we did, I believe, admirable work, it wasn't the same as what students would have received when they got here. And then we rolled into the new school year in that same model, and we're gradually able to build to where we're at now. But we know that even now, students that are dismissed, partway through the school day, 2/3 of the way through the school day, are not receiving the quantity of instruction directly from their teacher. So we're going to analyze what that looks like and how do we mitigate that. And they talked a lot about supports and creating a schedule that can support that, whether it's beyond the normal day or as we move into scheduling. They talked a lot about staff collaboration and putting together data teams so that they can really look at what does individual and collective progress look like within their class, within our school. And so as you put interventions in, are we able to give timely supports for kids and groups of kids and school-wide as needed? They talked about the value of articulating within their grades and between their grades so that there's a clear understanding of a student moving up from first, second to third, and making sure that those first and second grade teachers are having that conversation about what are kids doing well and what do they need and what are they expected to have as they move through. And then there's a big discussion right now about our curriculum. We were planning on adopting in the spring of last year a new science curriculum for K-5, and that got put on hold with COVID. Adopting a curriculum takes some work and some doing, and that wasn't where we wanted to put our priority for now. But it does put us in a position where we have several pieces of curriculum that we've budgeted for and that we're ready to roll out. And so as we kind of move forward, we're looking at what's our greatest need, because it's unlikely to be successful if we were to try to adopt several curricular areas simultaneously. So we're looking to stagger them. And so we're looking at, is our greatest need in a math curriculum or writing or science or history? These are areas that kind of popped out when we're talking with the teachers. And so feel free, if you have strong opinions on these, or you have suggestions on these, or even some other ways that we can increase student achievement, please feel free to put them in the chat, or if you have questions, we can answer those to the best we can right now. But this is the time, and it's a little harder through the Zoom, but this is the time for you to share information if you have it. So don't be shy if you've got some stuff that you would like to tell us. There will be a survey that comes out after this, early part of next week, that'll give you another opportunity to think about this. And I hope that in this session, we can kind of frame the direction we're going and get some great input from you either now or as the process goes forward. Does anybody have any questions or anything they'd like to share on student achievement? Pamela, I can't see the notes right now. Is there anything in there? Any questions that we have related to this? Okay, thanks. All right. So I'm going to move through to the second goal real quick. And this is a goal that we have not had in our previous plans. And so typically our previous plans were very focused on increasing student achievement. And they talked about increasing student achievement in various ways. And they were, what's our instructional programs and our teacher trainings and our parent involvements and our safe schools. And they were all designed to increase student achievement. One direction that we're veering somewhat is we are placing, student achievement as one of our primary goals, but we are also looking at putting character development and students' social emotional wellness up there as well. One of the reasons that we have been so adamant as far as getting kids back on campus, connected to their teachers and connected to their peers, is the harm that's been caused by kids being isolated and kids being away. And I've been really impressed that as we've been able to get students back, we've been able to address some of these issues prior to them manifesting the way they are in some other places. District Attorney Summer Stephan put out a report a few weeks ago that really outlined the harms that are being caused to kids across the county by being isolated at home. And they range from not having people protecting them from abuse within the home. They range from depression, suicidal ideations, all a myriad of challenges on really young kids. And so we understand that this situation, even with having kids back, is really traumatic. It's traumatic for our families, and it's traumatic for our kids, and it's traumatic for kids that don't fully understand, and there's some anxiety and fear around it. So we want to make sure that we have a goal in place that addresses those emotional needs, but also proactively builds them as kids of character. We've emphasized here at the school for a very long time our character counts, and we've awarded kids certificates for demonstrating that character. We have different character traits of the month. And when we talked to the teachers about this, they said, that's great, but we want that integrated a little bit more into what we do. They were saying it feels a little bit like a standalone, like you talk about character in these circumstances, but maybe it doesn't integrate with your lessons. And so they were looking at having a more of a character program, either the same or different, that aligns a little bit more, that's taught a little bit more, that the actions manifest more so that they turn into things. And they were also looking at some of the great things that our ASB has done and how can we expand our student leaders and our mentoring. A K-8 school presents some challenges. You have all your kids, 9 years pretty much. but it presents tremendous opportunity for kids that have been through something to really impart that. And we don't say that our eighth graders are full of tremendous wisdom, but they have the experience here at San Pasquale. They know what it's like. And we've been impressed time and time again at their ability to relate to younger students, whether it's reading to them, whether it's leading Spirit Wear, Spirit Weeks, welcoming them to campus, doing activities, Constitution Day type stuff. So our middle schoolers really do resonate and rise to that challenge. And so we're looking, how can we leverage that a little bit more? Getting just a little bit back to the social emotional supports, one thing we talked about is we've initiated what we're calling a multi-tiered system of support. And it's really, how do we link a lot of our supports together so that there is a comprehensive way that kids are supported, primarily socially and emotionally? And how are we measuring that? How do we know if what we're doing is working? So we're looking at that. And then the other piece that's always been an important piece of San Pasquale is our visual and performing arts program. Again, it's been really difficult for us to sustain the level of a program that we had before because kids can't congregate and you can't come and watch them. So can we leverage that visual performing arts program in our character building of our students and supporting some of those social emotional needs? Any questions or suggestions as far as our character development or support for kids that are struggling emotionally, Emily? All right, we're going to move into draft goal number 3. And this was a goal that was part of our last plan. And it's to provide a safe, clean, and well-maintained school. And a big focus of this in the last plan, it was kind of twofold. There was a focus on preventative and deferred maintenance, keeping the campus up, making sure that as we move forward, that our campus has hit 20 years old now. And a lot of things are showing their 20-year age. And how are we setting aside some money and how are we doing some preventative things so that as we do have these large repairs or replacement projects, they aren't directly impacting students' learning, meaning they aren't coming out of the same fund that was going to kids. And so we've been really diligent through the years as far as setting aside money for these deferred maintenance projects. We've got a huge HVAC project that's coming up, going to cost us a lot of money, but it'll help us twofold. It'll help make sure that the air in the classroom is cleaner, and it'll also run more efficiently. Unfortunately, we have money in our deferred maintenance to cover a lot of that. And so that's kind of the facility piece that things really focused on before. But when we talk to the teachers, obviously, we're looking at not only continuing those things so that replacing the air conditioning isn't having a negative effect on student learning, but also what's our COVID protocols. And the teachers were very praiseworthy in our what's working out really well, what do we want to continue, of all those efforts to clean and disinfect. And our maintenance crew has been outstanding through this process of proactive approach to keeping our classrooms clean and fogged and disinfected and making sure we have the supplies that we need. They had some good suggestions. We have some teachers that work well beyond their hours and here at nights. And so they were talking about adding more motion sensors and security lights and those types of things. So we're looking to do some of that kind of stuff. The other thing that the teachers focused on our kind of facility side of things is adding more outdoor learning spaces. We had talked pre-pandemic of, hey, we live in Southern California, we have a beautiful campus. How can we extend the classroom beyond the 4 walls? And once the pandemic hit, it became much more urgent and it became much more relevant. And so when you guys come back to campus, or if you've been here, you'll see we have a lot of tables and a lot of shades and a lot of spaces around campus for kids to expand. And that has not only been great for us as far as increasing ventilation and spacing between students, but we've also learned that there's tremendous opportunities in that. One of the big areas of focus that we've put during the school closure was on our school garden. We were able to secure several grants for the school garden, and we've been building that out. We now have a outdoor amphitheater and a stage and a native garden out there, and we've got plans as we move through the school year to fully build that out into an interactive learning space for our classes and our students. And it will have a lot of opportunities for not only outdoor learning, but outdoor learning that's directly connected to the classroom. And so when we were talking to the teachers about this, there was talk about let's encourage our parent volunteers to come back, and let's talk about the norms and expectations for use, and let's really get this aligned to our STEM curriculum. And so that is our overall goal. So you'll see this build out process happening. But one of the areas that we can take volunteers, and we've started to take volunteers, is in those outdoor learning spaces. And so if you are interested in moving forward in the garden area, let us know, because that was something that the teachers were saying, hey, you know, we're a little bit hesitant right now of introducing more adults or more people into a classroom environment, into that fixed cohort, but outside mitigates a lot of those risks. So if that's something that you're interested in, please let us know, because we would be more than happy to get connected to that. So any questions or comments or anything along the lines of our safe, clean, and well-maintained school? This doesn't say it on here, but this goal will also have things that we've had traditionally, which is what kind of drills are we doing and how do we keep kids safe from emergency situations and so forth. Pamela, do you have anything?
Just a question about shade in the front of the school.
Oh, okay. Can you read it for me?
Yeah, it says, can we add shade to the front of the school to prevent kids from getting overheated in the warmer days?
And the answer is possibly. Let me tell you a little bit about the shade stuff. We've had a long discussion on adding more shade to our campus. And we were able to use some of the money that we received in CARES funding, so kind of federal coronavirus funding, to start constructing more outdoor classroom spaces. And so we are currently waiting state approval, but we have secured the funding to build a shade structure, an additional shade structure on the TKK playground area. Because since I've started here, long time ago, the most passionate discussions that we had around were that we wanted to make sure that our youngest students were not frying out there on the TKK playground. And so we have secured that. But one of the reasons it had taken so long to do was the expense of it. And so the expense of putting on that structure, we have a 20 by 30 structure, metal top, so it's weather resistant, you know, keep the rain off. Mirrors what we have out there at the other table. The cost of that is a little over $100,000. And so it's really pricey. And so part of this thing is we have a couple suggestions for shade. We have some suggestions to put more out in the front of the school. We have some suggestions to put more out into the middle school area and some for the playground area. So we'll put that in as far as a recommendation and look at what are the areas that that make the most sense to start with. Because we know that it gets hot out in the front of the school. And then we look at how much is going to cost, how much would it be used, and all those kind of things. So it's definitely something that's on our radar. I just can't commit to whether it'll happen as we sort of move through this process. So thank you for that question. Pamela, anything else?
Just a question. I'm sorry, just a comment about.
It looks like you went mute again.
Sorry, I don't know what's happening. Just a comment about wishing that volunteers could be back on campus, so parents had a little bit more insight of what's going on. It's hard to address some of these issues, not being able to be here. And then also some information about how we can volunteer for some things like gardening and art, and when those will be an option.
Yeah, so let me address the parent volunteers. We desperately want you back. So this is not a change of position or policy. For those of you that know me, I love free labor, and we love having our parents here at school. It makes our school a better place. And it really, a lot of our parent involvement activities have really defined and accentuated who we are. So we're very eager to do that. The biggest challenge that we have right now, as I mentioned before, is the stable group and the cohorting and trying to reduce the risks that we're going to have any kind of infection or spread here at school that's going to shut things down. And so we want to make sure that we don't shut things down and we don't put people's health in danger. And so right now, we have had a small number of parent volunteers that are coming to school. And what they're primarily doing is they're not doing within classroom work. We have some that have come and helped and done some garden work. We've had some that have done activities with students when they're in their outdoor learning spaces. So out in the corral area, out in the garden area, in the playground area, where we can distance and space and reduce that risk of introducing more people into those stable cohorts. So those opportunities will continue. What will trigger the expansion is when we start seeing reduction in infection rates. Despite the big drop that we're seeing, we're still in the purple tier, which is the most severe tier. And as we start seeing some movement down in these other areas where we see less and less viral impact in our area, especially within our specific community, we can take some steps to have more people in. So I don't know when that's going to happen, but that's really the triggering piece for that to happen. And so as we kind of go through this process, we understand that it's limiting as far as the input to provide, especially since there's not a whole lot happening right now. But keep in mind, this is a kind of a 3-year plan moving out, and we do reevaluate this through that process. So I am super pleased that you guys are eager to return, and we are looking forward to welcoming you guys when we can. But like I said, right now we're a little bit limited based on the cohorting and distancing and risk mitigation that we're doing. Pamela, anything else before we move?
Just a question about, did you, I'm sorry, did you address how to volunteer for the garden and art?
Yeah, and how to volunteer? Contact, if you're looking to do it through your class, feel free to contact your child's teacher directly. If you're looking to do it more as sort of an organizer of these things, more campus-wide, feel free to contact me or Mrs. Lee, and we'd be happy to set you up with that. And then the last goal we're looking at, and this really ties into exactly what we were just talking about, which is putting a focus and a value and a goal of building and promoting our family and community partnerships. So this has kind of 2 pieces to it. It's really our school families, and then how do we tap in to some of the community resources that have consistent goals. One of the things when we talk to the teachers is they were saying, hey, we want these things to have some curricular connections to it. We've already talked about the garden type stuff and the STEM that ties into that. But they were talking about when we're able to, can we bring in more people to support our Everyone a Reader program to build kids reading. We used to have a run club here at school where we had some parent volunteers that would run with the kids in the morning time before school. The arts, obviously, with our Red Barn Arts program. The Safari Park program, kind of reaching out into some of those community resources. And then what are we doing and how can we support our English learners better through our community partnerships? The teachers had some suggestions as far as continuing and expanding some parent trainings as well. They were looking at parent trainings specifically for our English learners on literacy projects and so forth, but also for parents on things like when my kid's transitioning to middle school, what do they need to know? And Common Core math is not always the most logical of ways to teach math. It's not how you and I learned it. Can we have some nights really that kind of go into what is it and how can we support our kids in those areas? So there were some ways that we can not only invite and include our parents into curricular aspects, but also how do we provide you guys with what you need to be the best partners that we can be? I get a lot of complaints that I ask for money too much, and I do. But really, it's the human resource that ties us into some of these initiatives that have our biggest benefit towards our kids. So we're going to continue asking you for that kind of stuff. So I know these are a little bit difficult to go into right now because we're on the shutdown, but kind of keep in mind if there's some things that we can look to expand upon And we were looking at trying to find ways to merge our volunteers with some structured school things that what I mean by that is um, we don't want quality programs to go away simply because we don't have enough volunteer support. Like how can we build some structures within our school environment, either through staffing or programmatic, so that there provides more consistency through the years. One of the challenges that we have is volunteers will ebb and flow. And we want to make sure that that's not having a negative impact on our kids, or we can reduce it in some ways. So, real quick, just to let you know how this process works. I'm certainly not going to read this busy slide to you, but right about now is the time that we solicit out input from everybody at our school. We're going to be soliciting from the kids, and obviously, I told you, from the teachers and our leadership groups. And your voice is really important as we start moving forward. Sometimes there can be a disconnect between parents' experiences and experiences here at school. One of the benefits, if you will call them that, of this whole last year has been a greater integration with our parent community and our families with the instructional program. You know, you guys were tasked with being the homeschool teacher. Some of you still are. So there's a much greater understanding of the path that your kids are on, probably than any other time. And then as we did come back to school, the communication between home and school, teacher and parent, has been much greater than what we've seen in the past, because it's had to be. And I think you have a greater insight as to how our instructional practices are affecting your child in particular, and therefore would have lots of great information for us to consider as we develop a plan to build upon our strengths, improve upon the things that we could do better, and innovate in the areas that are open to that. So right now it's this gathering piece, and we'll do this gathering piece through the end of the month. And then we start drafting these plans. We determine whether these 4 goals are the right goals for us, if there's some other goals that we missed, and then where do we prioritize our resources. What we've always been challenged with here at San Pasquale is we receive less financial support from the state than any other school district in the county of San Diego. And it's the lot we've drawn, not much we can do about it, but how do we take those resources and put them to the areas where they provide maximum benefit? And that's maximum benefit to all kids, but making sure that none are left out. And so that's sort of that process as we kind of move through. And we'll look at some data that we have, and that'll help us drive some decisions. But like I said, we're going to gather some information and look to put a plan in place that serves your kids and serves all kids. And so that's kind of how this works. These drafts of this plan will continue to be presented at our board meetings, and we'll continue to reach out to you guys. And then come June, it gets approved, and that sets us on our course for next year and beyond. So that's kind of where we're at right now. That's all I have here. So I'm going to stop the sharing and check in to see. Pamela, do we have any questions on anything that's come up or any comments to share?
We had a question about, and I believe that maybe she wants to speak about the translations during the Zoom and the offline learning. There were some suggestions.
Yes, if there's a question that's better unmuted and you feel comfortable doing that, please feel free.
Good morning, Mr. Burrow. This is Noemi. So basically, as when as a disclaimer, this is not meant to be negative, but as to bridge these resources that we already have. I feel that when the translators are trying to help the children, it takes away from the other children, but the child that is being helped doesn't really obtain it because there's limited interaction with the translator and the child being helped. Like in Valentina's school, they have an option of translation, but it's muted to the rest of the class. So they can have an ongoing conversation, and it is not only limited, get to this page, and then they actually walk through the paperwork with the child, and then the other children that are they're not being impacted, they're not taken away, because I see, being multilingual, I see the frustration at different levels. And then, for example, my own child here, she's trying to learn another language, and now there's another translator translating to another child, and it becomes it becomes like very overwhelming on my side. But then I see the child that is being helped, and I understand the frustration, and I do appreciate what the teacher is doing. I appreciate what the child is doing and a translator, but I personally don't feel that it's to the point that is very beneficial to the child that we're trying to help, because the child may not even have the paperwork ready. So they spend most of the time searching for the paperwork, the translator telling the child, find this paperwork. And by that time, the rest of the class is done.
Mm-hmm.
So if that translator will meet with the child prior, make sure that they know what material is going to be covered. And then if the translator has the translator communication separate from the ongoing class, but they can still unmute themselves and do the interaction as the rest of the class, like in Valentina's class, I see it's very efficient.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if I'm pretty sure they're still, because in Valentina's, they do everything through Zoom, and they do
Mm-hmm.
it this way. So I'm pretty sure we can implement it here for those children to learn the way they need to be taught.
Yeah, I'd be interested in learning more. And just so I understand, is this like um, a small group of students that are being instructed, and during that instruction, and this is happening? Is that the setting?
Correct.
Okay. All right. And we may want to talk a little bit more so I can find out what they're using and how they're using it, because if they're using Zoom, then it's a tool or a feature that we could also use. So I'll ask Pamela to set up a time that you and I can talk and find out a little bit more, so we can do some research to see if that would be an option for us as well.
Yeah, and once again, I don't mean to be disrespectful, but I do see frustration on the teacher, and I see frustration on the English learners being paused so much for the translation process as well.
Oh yeah, no, I appreciate it, because that's something that I was unaware of. So part of this process is, how do we do things better? So no, I take it as no disrespect and appreciate the input.
Thank you, sir. Mhm.
All right. Any other questions or comments that we have? Pamela?
Yeah, wanted some clarification on middle school syllabus and the middle school curriculum, communication, and what topics are being covered. I don't know if she wants to speak about it, but there's a little bit of wanting some clarification on middle school curriculum.
Yeah, I might need a little bit more details on that if anybody wants to share that, because I can tell you just very broadly, in middle school, the topics that are taught are all Common Core aligned. So depending on whether it's language arts or math or history or science, it's Common Core aligned curriculum, but there's a broad number of topics within there. Is there a specific question that you'd like to share?
Yeah, Mark, I just wanted to, I felt like in elementary school, the teachers would communicate and kind of send like newsletters and different things out, like, here are some topics that are being covered, here are some, books we're reading, and kind of that idea. And I didn't know if, again, in this whole pandemic deal, that it's just kind of a miscommunication, but I'm just not getting that information at the middle school level. Again, maybe, it's because of what's happening, but just kind of a heads up on like just different topics, different books, that type of stuff. And, just kind of communicating, I guess, a little bit more and getting a little bit more familiar.
Yeah, and that's a good point. I will check into that. And it could very well be a COVID thing, because when we rolled through this, the middle school team did a really good job while we were shut. So for the end of last year, the beginning of this year, with providing those overview kind of this is what the week's going to look like. These are the tasks. And they worked cross-curricular so that the parents would get, one communique that kind of linked things up. But there might not be that same, well, it sounds like there's not that same level of communication now. And there's always a challenge between middle school of looking at the kids' level of independence versus what is being shared with parents so that they can support that. But I would agree with you, if you're not understanding what the big picture is or a preview of what's happening, what's being taught, we can do better in that. So I'll look into that. All right. Any other questions about anything else? I really appreciate it. Next steps moving forward. Like I said, expect a survey to come out. It'll be a combination of some fixed stuff and some opportunities to share. It'll be framed around these goals that we're looking at here. And I know Mrs. Kandamora was very polite in not wanting to offend me, but if there's areas that we can improve, let us know. That's how we get better. We're, like I said, have the opportunity to set forth a new plan for the next few years. We only do this, a brand new plan, every third year. So this is a good time for us to say, what have we learned through all these challenges? And if we're permitted to do so and return to a quote unquote normal school year, what's the best way to do that? And so I really appreciate you guys taking the time here today to kind of listen to where our frame is and your willingness, I hope, to kind of share what you think is working well and what we can improve upon. Because like I said, our goal is to continue to do better by your kids and get better each day, each week, each year. And that's what this process is all about. So unless there's any other questions out there, Pamela, I think we might be all finished up. Okay. All right. Well, thank you guys again for your time. We will post this. I'm sure none of you want to watch it again, but if there's some folks that may have missed it and have some questions, this will give them a lot more background on the survey stuff that's coming out. And I really appreciate you guys taking the time with us to kind of figure out where we've been, where we're going, and where we will go. So thank you very much for your support, your partnership, and I look forward to welcoming you back here as soon as we can. All right. We'll see you all soon. Bye-bye.